What's...
So let's give you a little background on that.
Well, my dad found the lot
Right.
over here when he was visiting on Chautauqua Lake. Not Chautauqua, somewhere on...
Before he was married.
Yeah, before he was married, and so he purchased the one lot, 40-foot lot, and it wasn't too built up around here, so then after we got married, then they decided to put up this little cottage, and it was a Sears prefab, just a little box thing, and that's how we got here.
Terrific. Now, how did you guys meet? Ken, how did you meet Lois?
Well, we met after, let's see, while we were in college, wasn't it, Lloyd? I just gotta think back now.
After
In
the
Pittsburgh.
war, you came home, and his family belonged to the same church as
Yeah.
ours, and I knew him, I knew who he was in high school. The guy that was always going around with Ginny Stevenson.
Ginny Stevenson, huh?
First love, or maybe fifth, I don't know.
Well,
If you want to plead the fifth at any point here, you can, Ken. You know.
her father and mother sat very far forward in our church, and so did my mother and father, just across the aisle. And my mother was a vocalist who had a huge voice, and Lois would always look around.
My mother would say, "Turn around, Lois." Never knowing it would be my husband.
Yeah, and of course I then eventually sang in the choir, and but we did get together. I say the church was a big part of it. When we had bowling alleys in the basement of our church, 4 bowling alleys, and there were no automatic pin setters. You had to have people setting the pins, and there was a league, young couples league that met on, I think, Wednesday evenings, and young married couples, and you know, it was a great group, and we really got to know each other through that, I think.
Well, we were married at that time. By then, we were married.
Okay.
And you were sometimes going off to practice with the Mendelssohn Choir on the bowling night. So your friend and I would go. So we were married.
Yeah.
You wouldn't allow that before we were married, I don't think. So, Don Wilde.
So he's always been quite a singer, Ken.
Well,
He's been involved with the church choir and the Mendelssohn Choir, which was
the Mendelssohn Choir was a volunteer group in Pittsburgh. You had to qualify to be in it, and it was a wonderful experience. In fact, the first time I was ever here at Van Buren, I think, was, this is kind of it, I don't know if you want this
Sure.
data, but the Mendelssohn Choir was well respected, about 120 people maybe in Pittsburgh, and many of whom had much better musical expertise than I did. But when we were invited to sing at Chautauqua by some wealthy Pittsburgher, I think, had arranged for the Mendelssohn Choir to come. And so we came up in a bus, the choir, Friday evening, I think, or Friday afternoon, and stayed at the Hotel Jamestown. Everybody had a registered room, and it was really, I think back on that, and well, anyway, that worked out fine, and afterwards, Lois came over and said, "I'll meet you at the gate to Chautauqua after the rehearsal Saturday afternoon." We were going to sing on Sunday, I think. And so Lois came over and met me and picked me up and said, "Gee, tonight we've met a couple that young people that I knew when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and we're all going up to the Van Buren Bay Inn and dance tonight." And it was Sam and Petey Price.
No kidding.
Yeah. And Mary and Morgan Doolittle.
They were renting the cottage down, 4 or 5 cottages down.
My word.
And
Yeah,
we had grown up as a little bit older than that, but
I
anyway.
never met the Prices before. Well, Lois hadn't either until,
Well, they went, for 14 years, they went to Ross Mountain down in New Pittsburgh because their grandmother lived in Pittsburgh, Mrs. Dybert,
Right.
was part of the Armstrong clan. And so they hadn't been back for all those years. And Mrs. Tinkham rented a cottage down there so that the girls could each have 3 weeks, Nancy included. And Petey and Mary decided to combine in time. And then they invited us to come over with them. And that was the next year though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, after that. But we just had a ball together, and so we ended up the following couple of years coming with them, even though my parents were up here.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was more fun down there. So anyway, that's how they got involved with us.
well, it's been a very special place, this Van Buren Bay, in Lois's life, and mine too. And sort of a little community of, I don't know how to describe it, but unique in many ways. And that was the first time that I'd ever been really in Chautauqua County to speak of. And then when we were cottaging down there with Sam and Petey and Morgan and Mary, and Charlie Price came over a couple times, and on Sundays they'd
John,
have a
Nancy?
picnic and type thing. And I always talked about, I wanted to get a typewriter franchise in a town like Jamestown on my own, where I could have my own business. But in the bigger cities, they had the factory branch offices, and you couldn't do that. So you had to get a franchise in a town like Jamestown. Charlie said, well, why don't you ride over and meet Mr. Long, William A. Long, because he said that it seems like he's aging and the business is kind of going downhill. And so I did one Saturday afternoon, you can imagine. And I walked in and introduced myself, and it turned out I bought half of it, and then about a year or two later, I bought the other half. And it was relatively successful. And then we had a little branch in Dunkirk and one in Warren, and had about 12 or 15 employees
Yeah.
for a while. It was a great experience. I think back on that. But the nice thing about it, Kirk, is how well the people in Jamestown and Warren accepted Lois and I. Lois was not really very happy about moving up here because she loved her teaching job, and she really was disappointed when I suggested we might consider moving, and because she was just in a niche that she loved, and in a school up on the hill, not the Hill District, but up on Pittsburgh over on the south side, wasn't it? But anyway, that's not important. And so finally she said she'd try it. And it took a couple years before I think Lois felt that she was really comfortable here, and
Oh, I don't think so.
would.
Didn't take long, really. Didn't take too long.
Well, I remember Dick Allison from Cummins. He was the first employee at Cummins, and he said that when we try to get new people here, the big problem is to get their wives involved in the community. And if we can get them through the first year, they begin to like it. But the first year, it's kind of tough, because if they came from a big city, it's hard to adjust. Although Lois, thank goodness, did adjust, and we're still here. But, I often think about it. Is this what you wanted to talk about?
That was great. I love
Yeah.
this. This is like, the biography stuff, most people know. This is the
Yeah.
stuff I find interesting because Cindy was screaming and kicking and screaming because she lived in New Jersey, right outside New York City,
Oh,
coming to Jamestown, New York. So I know what you're speaking.
yeah, yeah. But then I got involved in teaching up here, so that worked out. But I remember not going to the first teachers' meeting. It was clear up in Buffalo. I wasn't going clear up there to a meeting, so I stayed home. And, we were used to going just to the Oakland area for a meeting, not
Yeah.
going to another city, for heaven's sakes.
When you had the franchise here, Ken, it was Royal Typewriter, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And wasn't that the preeminent brand?
it was. And directly after World War II, particularly, it became the leading manufacturer of typewriters. And then when IBM came along, they started to dominate the electric typewriter business, and Royal was the dominant manufacturer of manual
Mm-hmm.
typewriters, and that was a great experience in many ways, and because typewriters were used by every secretary you remember in your law office,
I did.
and how that worked. And I was trying to think of when I went up. I decided one time that it'd be nice to take our service manager and some of the people up to the factory in Hartford, Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
which we did, and went to see, because I'd never seen them manufactured, and I think they had 6,000 or 7,000 employees there at Royal, and produced a large number of units of typewriters every day. It was sort of mind-boggling when you think back on it. As today it seems, well, of course, computers are probably selling in excess of that, but it was really a great experience for us to go up there to Hartford, Connecticut, and see the home office and the plant. Worked out very well.
At some point, you decided to get out of that business, and how did
Well,
it happen?
Well, that's a good question. I have to stop and think back. We, I think, I'm trying to think how that all came about and evolved. And
Did you know Andy?
I had a
Jochum?
chance to, yeah,
Yeah.
well, a little bit, but
Friends of
I knew his dad. His
Jane and
da-
Andy Jochum were our friends.
Okay, yeah, okay.
yeah, the seniors, his mother and father.
Yeah.
And he expressed an interest, and he was a great salesperson, and still is, as far as I know. I think he's doing very well in this little business he has. Pardon?
Chuck Norton was very,
Yeah,
very involved and very dependable. I mean, they were sort of running things,
Okay.
I think.
well, I don't know, it just came along. Art metal became a large part of our business, office furniture. And art metal was on the skids, as you recall. Unfortunately, it had a wonderful product line. And she has a great company and a great,
With
Yeah.
Knoll Furniture too.
yeah, they owned Knoll, Knoll, and that was a very significant part. And I was trying to think, we decided to, I don't know, I decided I'd been in the office equipment business all my life. And maybe it was time for me to bow out gracefully and try to find something else to do. And fortunately, I was in a position where I didn't have to work diligently every day from 8 to 6, and so I decided to sell it, and Andy and Mickey Doolittle and Chuck Norton bought it, the three of them, and
Was Mick a buyer? I didn't realize.
well, that's a good question. I can't recall.
You know, but
He had run into some problems with AVM Corporation, as you may recall. Great guy. And
so we took a trip. Maybe that's when we went out west.
it is.
You're retired.
We just decided to take a few months and sort of
Yeah.
go out. We'd never been west of Chicago, so we drove out through Chicago and south into the
Well, it
south.
was a long trip.
Oh,
6
yeah.
weeks.
Ended up in San Diego, and went all the way up the coast.
What fun.
Yeah, it was. And some places we only drove 40 miles some days,
Stayed
and
for a week over.
didn't have.
We liked
Yeah.
the area. You know, it was nice.
It was a great experience, and but that was the end of my office equipment, and then I think Bankers Trust Company.
First, Larry Edwards.
Yeah, well, that was before that, though.
Oh,
The Bankers Jamestown,
oh, okay.
Joel Gaden or Bob Barger or somebody thought I could lend some help to the bank in terms of PR because I'd been active in the community. And would I consider trying it? And I said, sure. I really was not, into banking the way I probably should have been. But it was a good part of my life. And so I went to work for the Bank of Jamestown, which became Bankers Trust Company, which became Key Bank. And so it's funny how all this, not funny, but it comes back gradually as you think about it. Then that somehow, excuse me, I had a falling out with them. And having run your own little business for all your life, it was difficult to adjust to a big company like Bankers Trust, who had their own ideas of how every company should be run. And so I left there, and that was about the time that Larry Edwards, who was head of First National, approached me about working for them in trying to build some goodwill and local identity and so forth. But do you remember Larry at all?
Absolutely. Well, of course, we were tenants in that building.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So Larry and very very much part of our world. He was a very gregarious,
Yeah,
he was a presence.
he was. I was on a committee at church with him, and the minister, I think it was Sandy McConnell at the time, had a lot of respect for Larry's.
Yeah, we became good friends, and in fact went on a golf outing, four of us, Jack Heppenstall, Larry Edwards, and Sandy, and myself, down to Florida, and had a great experience doing that. But that's a separate involvement. But I think back, why we've stayed in Jamestown all these years, because we had opportunities to buy businesses elsewhere that might have had more potential. But, we like the people, number one.
Oh, yeah, we didn't want to leave.
Yeah, and then having this place here available to us every summer, we just got niched in to the community, and I got involved with a lot of fundraising activities in Jamestown, trying to help it and boost it along. And that enabled me to become more of a integral part of the community. And I've always been amazed at how I was accepted here. You know, in Pittsburgh, young guy selling typewriters, never would have gotten to know the president of U.S. Steel Corporation or been involved with all those kind of people. But it was here, everybody accepted us the same as they did the chairman of the board of XYZ company, you know. And I always thought, wow, that's amazing.
I attribute it to Mr. Long's old car that you bought. It was a little old
Dodge
coupe that he would ride around in. So he was no threat to anybody, you know.
Yeah.
So people just got a kick out of meeting him.
Well, talk about some of those individuals. Your paths crossed at some point with John Hamilton. How did that happen, and what was your impression of John?
Well, I think, I got to know him a little bit over the years, just out of respect. He had such a good reputation, and as an astute business person and so forth. So we, trying to think, was it he conceived or had exposure to community foundations somewhere along the line, and called a group of us together. Were you part of that, Kurt?
No.
Sam Price, Charlie Price, and Sam and
Miles Last.
Yeah.
Probably part of that.
half a dozen of us up to his office one day, and he explained a little bit about what the community foundation is and what it does, and would we have any interest in pursuing that concept. And so we got together a couple times and sort of kicked the idea around, and the more we heard about it, the more we liked it, because Jamestown, while it had a lot of foundation assets, I think a public foundation offered something that the private foundations didn't. And that's how it got started. And, it was a great experience because they had a consultant. John had talked to a consulting firm.
Gene Struckoff.
Yeah. How'd you remember that?
Well, I came in a little bit later, but I remember that whole study. Yeah.
And they said that if we could raise, was it $1 million in 5 years of assets, we would be able to sustain it, they thought. But they were rather doubtful as to whether we could do that or not. And so we set our hearts to do it, and were able to far exceed that in 5 years. And Francis Grow and some of the others that became involved.
Well, Betty Lene was at the beginning.
Yeah. And startup. The concept was clear to me, and I think to most others, that if we could have a foundation that was totally public and objectionable, now that's not the right word, but
Objective.
Yeah, objective in its decision making, and that would be and unrestricted funds would have a lot of appeal in Jamestown. And gosh, here we are today, $60 million foundation, and turning about 4 or 5 million over to the community every year. and scholarships and individual gifts. And it's been a wonderful experience to see that happen and see what people can do if you want to do it. Francis Grow, do you remember him at all?
Absolutely, yeah.
He was a great influence in organizing and getting that put together and in a way that it would work, and kept his eye on it. And, fabulous guy. He always, I probably am being repetitive, but we would have lunch almost once a week, and we became very good friends. And I've often thought about Fran and appreciated his friendship very much, but he always would ask the question of, we talk about the community and the business and the foundations and the assets, the dollars of assets, and he tracked the assets and said that our community has more dollars of assets in foundations than probably any community our size, meaning population,
Right.
in this part of the country. And then he would always end up with saying, well, if that's the case, why aren't we doing better?
Right.
You know, and we pondered that and tried to explore some ways that they could do better, although not to say that the foundations haven't done a lot. And when you think about it, Gabby, in recent years, took a different tack with the ice arena and did take a giant step into economic development. A lot of people don't agree with what they've done, but I think it's a great step forward to see some of these foundation dollars put to work in a positive way, economically way. I mean, much of the years went by, as you know, Greg, and they would get requests for a new typewriter. That was a common, every request that foundations would, First Presbyterian Church might need a new typewriter, so that would be a request to one of the foundations. And we felt that really that wasn't changing the style and the need of our community. But
Well, I think one of the critical things was when Fran and you, and I was on the board at the time, made the decision to get a tax opinion, that finding a way in which private foundations could give to economic development. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a really big tipping point, because all the private foundations, we can't possibly do anything to assist in economic development. There had to be a way, and it was Fran and the community foundation said, let's get a tax opinion. Let's figure out how that could happen. And it got funded, I think, by Gabby through us, and a tax opinion was obtained, and that opened the floodgates.
Oh,
That there was a mechanism that could happen. And that was critical. Kind of lost in the shuffle, but that
yeah,
has opened the opportunities to do things like that.
well, that really was a goal, because I always quote Betty LeNay saying, when we started the public foundation, one of the big objectives was to have that freedom of giving. I don't know if that's the right term, but in other words, we would talk about medical care, and she would say, well, who knows what health care will be in 20 years. I mean, it may be all owned by the government and entirely furnished by the government. And if that was true, we would want to be able to deal with it and not just be restricted Is that
Yeah.
address
Yeah, exactly.
what you're thinking? Yeah, that is as always, and as a matter of fact, continues to be a big concern of mine. It's hard still when people get right down to making a gift and deciding, yeah, I'm going to put an amount in my will that will go to the community foundation. And when that happens, it's a good decision. They think, let's give it totally unrestricted, so the board of directors, at 20 years from now, they'll know what the community needs. But you know, Greg, it's interesting. It doesn't seem to work that way. I mean, most people, when it gets right down to making a gift, they want to know what it's going to be used for, you know? And I can understand that. Oh, thank you, Lloyd. I get this hoarseness in the mid-mornings. Would you like a glass of water?
I'm fine, thanks.
Thank you, Lloyd. And, but we worked on the Lene Civic Center and got that started.
Well, talk about that. I mean, I know the end game, and I know that you were chairman, and you raised an incredible amount of money, more than anybody would have thought you could have raised, but how'd you get
Well,
positioned to do that?
I think Greg Peterson helped with that, and Marty Izzig, and some of the people that got caught up in the enthusiastic of having a nice facility like that. Philip Morris, you know, remember him?
I do.
He was the one that really instigated the concept and sold the idea of getting it off the ground. And then I was asked to chair it. Actually, Mr. Lene had given $1 million, and the foundations had put together $1 million, so our job was to raise the other $1 million. And you thought, gee, well, that's not too tough. We got $2 million, $2.5 million, and we can raise another one. Well, it turned out it was a bit more of a challenge than we thought. But it was a great experience, and we dug around and formed a board and had a grant, well, not a grant committee, but a group of people that were interested in getting it off the ground. And we worked like very hard to put that off over the top. We even went down to Florida. I remember Joel Gate and I, and to see a couple people down there that we thought might be large contributors, and turned to what was work into a little bit of a fun thing, affair too. But it was great to see that happen, and I think it's all in all, it's been a real plus for the community. It certainly has its problems, as you know, every agency does now, not for profit. And but I admire. Why do we live here? You know, once in a while, I say to people, well, you could live anywhere you want. I mean, anywhere in the country that you wish. Why are you here? And it is interesting to see. I think it's Chautauqua Lake, in our case, Lake Erie, and the Chautauqua Institution, and gosh, but mainly I just think it's the people, and the quality of life, and the ability to go play golf in 15 minutes and be on the golf course and not have it take 10 hours to just get there and get registered, and you know. And the same with skiing. Lois, I don't ski, but I think, you know, gosh, people can head down to Holiday Valley and enjoy that
Okay.
facility, and for a lot less money than you could in other areas, or well, I think of Pittsburgh, but with friends that down there that ski, and but it's a much more costly deal to put a weekend of skiing together than it would be here in Jamestown. And well, just sometimes I don't think we've fully realized what all we have, you know. And
Well, what's the challenge, I mean, for our area? Because you've listed some assets, which we have, and I certainly am also an advocate of that. But what's the challenge to enhancing those assets? What's your sense?
boy, I think the challenge is getting people to realize that we need their help, and we need a lot of volunteer help, and maybe that's not the good answer, but I think what's made the community so successful, well, I say so successful, we're all struggling, all little manufacturing towns are struggling now, but I think that the success that we're having is coming from the drive that people like you and I and others have in making it a more stable economic community. It's easy to say and hard to define, but we need to focus on some of those things and how we can improve. I was interested in the Chamber of Commerce Award that I received last year, and I was just overwhelmed by the number of people that were there from all over the county at this annual fair. And I thought, wow, how can we miss? When I looked out around the room and saw the quality of people that were participating in the Chamber's effort to improve the community.
Well, I think it's a tribute also to your continuing commitment. The reality is, whether it's Fredonia College, whether it's been the Community Foundation, whether it's been the work you've done through the Jamestown Savings Bank, its creation, the Northwest's involvement, the fact that you led the naming rights on the arena. I mean, that just sings out there. And I realize there's commercial benefit, but more importantly, it's community benefit of that whole thing. So you've been very consistent for a long period of time of leveraging that commercial, corporate, community aspect. I think you're a real role model. I mean, you mean seriously.
Well, that may be by accident more than on purpose, but it turned out that way, and I'm glad that I've been able to help and have my efforts. I appreciate your thoughts too, Craig, and hearing what you had to say, because you folks at Phillips Seidel have been awfully good citizens of our community, and so many professional, I guess I shouldn't say attorneys and doctors, are not really interested in commercial development and giving and so forth. But I think you folks have been outstanding in that regard. But do you have something to add to that?
I'm just concerned about the poverty in Jamestown and what, and the not helping those people to realize that they too can contribute, not just the guys that are doing it. And there are wonderful young people working for Jamestown, but I think that, it'd be nice if,
Mhm.
and like the people on Liberty Street, I think that's wonderful, that neighborhood,
Mhm,
joint neighborhood kind of thing. Need more of that,
Right.
where there's interest in the community like you guys have all had. That would be my wish for the future.
And it would be great if there was a way, and I don't, personally, I haven't figured this out yet, but I talk about it, is to mobilize the underutilized. And that is part of that, the folks, give them a reason to wake up in the morning and knowing when the day is done, they've moved some ball along. I also put in the same category retired teachers. And I say that with all humility, but there's an awful lot of people younger than me who I have checked out on that, and they're kind of hanging around. They're quality people, but they haven't found a reason to get up and to do something for the community. They're all on their, pensions, and it's due, and you'd say, great, they earned it, but you're too young to just, at 58, play golf the rest of your life. You're too bored. So I happen to believe that there's a whole way somebody can gather them, grab their energy. You're not going to have them commit 40 hours a week. It ain't going to happen. But commit something for the good of the community. Because we have always, a boatload of people on volunteerism. That's an incredible, unique part of this community. But it still takes a quarterback to kind of figure out how to take that group of teachers, the younger kids, the people on 2nd Street, to seemingly, they must have energy, but they have no place to really let it out, except in this one.
Yeah, no direction or organization. And,
Exactly.
yeah.
The Kay Birches and the Donna Deals, the people like that, did so much for Soup Kitchen.
Right.
And there are people like that, and you're great people that know how to be organized and get things rolling. Good point.
And then, but I hate to say it's an age thing, and I say that lovingly. Kay and the whole group, they have always been brought up in the volunteerism, so that was just sort of a natural leap, and they've been involved and they've made a difference. There's this the next generation down, somehow that, I hate to say they feel like they're entitled to not do much, but I probably shouldn't be taping myself talking about this stuff. But it's, I see teachers all the time, and I say, you guys need to get involved with the Project Troy Peterson, the Jackson Center, just come in 4-6 hours a week, and they do. But you got to go to them, and it's just all ad hoc. It just happens that I see them, you look bored, why don't you come and help us out here? And they do. But there's no organized way to get them going, like a retired teachers organization. Anyways,
well,
I think that's an untapped asset.
our neighbor, a former neighbor in Lakewood, who is deceased now, who lived, right behind Dr. Mueller there.
Who's that?
Oh,
That's what I'm asking you.
Or no?
No. Sandy, is Sandy,
Yeah. Well-
Don Hoyt.
Don Hoyt.
He tried to get a group together of saging and aging
That's right.
people, because he felt, like you did, that there's a wealth of knowledge in all these retired people that have
Yeah.
contributed and have earned, built the manufacturing community and all that, and somehow we tried to focus on how to capitalize on that, and we just didn't quite get the thing off the ground.
He was inspired by the talk at JCC, a breakfast talk. remember?
Hmm.
One of
Yeah.
them. And those are a good thing for more people to come to, actually,
That's right.
because they can be quite interesting.
It does make sense, though, that you, like you say, whether it's teachers or doctors or professional people, or even any lay people that have given their life to a community and worked hard and done a lot of volunteer work and can identify needs that many of us don't see. But it didn't quite sail, and we couldn't quite get it going. But I was trying to think of other things too, Kirk. But if you think of anything, Lloyd, feel free.
Well, you know what I find interesting is your both of your initiatives. I mean, you've taken some stuff out of whole cloth and many times made it something extraordinary. And again, back to the Community Foundation, Jamestown Savings Bank. You know, that was something, a whole new community type bank. I think you were the first chartered bank in many, many years.
New York State, yeah. Yeah, and
That took chutzpah.
yeah, and that of course turned out very well in terms of economic development. There's probably there's about, in the New York division, of course that encompasses Buffalo and Rochester now, but the Jamestown area, you know, we have a lot of wonderful things going just here that wouldn't be there if it wasn't for that bank.
At one point, I don't even know if I know, Ken, at some point you must have sat around a cup of coffee and decided, let's do a bank.
Well, actually Andy Dorn from Buffalo came down and
From Dunn,
Lou Sidoni.
he was freaked out.
Yeah, that's right. And wanted to promote a bank, and could we see any value in that? And
He
we-
didn't sleep again. His pills, he's been taking the medication
Yeah.
for this pain, and I can see you're getting a little,
Well, I do
Very
because of this medication I take, but trying to stay with it.
Well, we're about to the end here. So.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I wish I could think of some other things that might be helpful, but it does seem like we have a wealth of talent in our community, and if, as you say, if we can capitalize on it some way and keep it moving and keep people interested in what's going on down the road ahead of us, instead of reflecting on all the things we've done in the past. I think it's more important to focus on the future than it is patting yourself on the back and saying, here's what we've done and so forth.
Well, you've always done that. I mean, both of you. It's always been very forward-looking. And I mean, you could have rested on your laurels after starting the Community Foundation or the Reginald A. Capital Campaign. I mean, you just think about all the things that you've been involved and everything you've seemingly touched has been successful. You were one of the first people to move down to Lutheran Social Services.
yeah, I guess they always think we were nuts.
Yeah, well, that's true, but
And it's
you
worked
made a
out.
leap. You made a leap in saying, all right, I'm going to get out of this one aspect of the life, which is a house and lawn and all that stuff, and I'm going to get focused on Lutheran. And you really set the stage for many other people to follow. And
Well, it's been
Well, I hope that's true.
Yeah, we feel that it's been a good move, and especially now that, but actually it's worked out that our daughter could stay there all summer.
yeah, how great.
She's been supervising the removal of trees in the woods behind us
Oh, really?
yesterday, and we got a kick out of hearing about that
Yeah.
process. So, no, it's been a good thing for us to do that. still have this place.
Yeah.
That was the objective.
Well, yeah, it has. And
Um,
Yeah.
plus, I always tell the story, Lois, that Ken had dragged me along into a lot of areas which I probably would have never gotten into, with whether it's Community Foundation, Fredonia, and all this initiative. So I just followed in his footsteps. That's been my whole career. If I could be like Ken Strickler.
Hey, you're doing
Well,
all right on your own.
Hey, you're a blessing to the community, Greg.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
You and Cindy.
And when you
both.
think of what Robert Jackson Center has become
Wow.
and is, and there's something that is portraying a part of our community that's very unique, and a lot of people never have any awareness of Robert Jackson, or I often think, gee, here's a person that had 1 year of college and became a justice of the Supreme Court, and wow, lived in.
Well, and that was the time when we were coming up here. Ken got all this information from Sam and those people about
Oh yeah, well the one
people and
weekend I came to see about purchasing that business was Price had borrowed his mother-in-law's Cadillac and they had driven in the funeral service for Robert Jackson. So he was all excited about that.
See, that your paths crossed. You just didn't realize it at the time. Because it would have been 54, sure. Yeah.
Is that right?
The Robert Jackson
Okay.
funeral was in October of 1954.
Yeah. We moved here December 1st of 54, and I came up a lot of pre-weekends and getting some stuff organized.
Moved into Liberty Street up on the second floor, and it was snowing, and it never stopped until I don't remember when.
Wow, yeah, 3 days. And we heard a sleigh bell coming, and we ran to the window and looked out, and here was a horse clearing the sidewalks in Jamestown.
Yeah.
And we thought, wow, what have we done? Where have we come? And
Great.
yeah, never forget that. It's a great community. And same over here in the North County, too. I wish and hope that, as we all do, that we could work a little closer together in many ways. But I think
A lot of neat people over here too, but we're losing them.
Right.
the college, Fredonia, SUNY Fredonia, Dennis Hefner, who just retired, was a great asset to the community. And I think most of those kinds of things are helping dramatically to pull the area together. We all tend to think of the North County and the South County, but we're all one county.
Well, and that's why Fredonia is still one of the greatest unsung assets in our part of the county, the South County. It's such a huge engine, such a huge asset up here. But I don't think it's fully appreciated down in the Jamestown area. And as I've tried to get Fredonia to do programming down, take all your wonderful musical programs, just put them in a car and bring them down to the Jackson Center or someplace, JCC, showcase. It's still a work in progress, but you hope for it. Well, Ken, this has been great. Lois, thank you for opening up the door here. And
Oh, thank you for coming over. I very much appreciate visiting with you. And
Always.
we always have a lot of respect for you, Greg, and all that you're doing. And how's your house coming along here?
the never-ending story.
Isn't
It's
it?
fine. It's Cindy's put on lack of a better term. Sherry came up with the best term of all. It's sort of an addition, and it's a mother-in-law's addition.
Oh,
And I said, yeah, that's it. It's exactly, because I couldn't figure out what it's going to be used for, but They modeled it all off the Beck and Tinkham drawings. I don't know if you've seen it, but when you
Yeah.
drive down, it's coming along, and
Looks
since,
great.
yeah. And
We
so-
saw it from our old house,
Where- yeah,
actually,
okay.
because the Steins insisted that we go see their kids'
Oh.
house.
Gotcha.
And so we finally did. We were amazed. It just knocked the socks off us, so to speak, but
Right.
it was just amazing. But anyway, and we saw your place, and then we had to drive down the street to
Sure,
get
of
a better
course.
look.
Yeah.
And, I think it's well done
Yeah.
as far as the Dutch colonial style.
Now, did you-
and all.
Have an architect do that, Jake?
Yeah, that's
And
definitely above my pay grade.
they
I don't
could look,
understand how-
look back and find the old architectural records of Beck and Tinkham, I guess.
He had all of it, and he just wanted to make sure he modeled it, not too big, still,
Yeah.
right? And
Uh-huh,
now all the landscaping's in, and Cindy's working on some interior stuff.
uh-huh.
Oh,
Great.
Uh,
I get feeling better. I'd love to see it sometime. When you like. Now, did you replace the little breakfast area that was off the kitchen? Is that?
Well, the Castles did that.
Oh.
The Castles had turned it
They
into a
opened
kitchen,
it,
yeah, they opened it all up.
Mm.
And so we just simply rearranged some of the counter space in the kitchen. So Cindy, what started off as just a kitchen project,
Oh.
next thing you know, she wanted a patio, next thing, looking towards the lake on that side lot.
Uh-huh.
And then she said, well, for winter weather, we should have it built in a little bit so we could use it as sort of a dining room, look at the lake.
Uh-huh.
And the next thing you know, she's building an office. Next thing you know, it's. I said, what are you doing? This is.
Well, you have room too for your kids to come home,
Well,
don't you? And
That's really the point.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and you still have all your
It's
privacy.
way too much for us.
Yeah.
When a time when most people would be downsizing, we're upsizing.
Well, that's smart. With us, we downsized. Here's Jeannie in our place. We want to go back home next week. We're trying to figure out how, because she hasn't moved yet. So, but that's smart because you have kids that
Right.
are all away, and you want them to come back,
Yeah.
especially to this area.
We're not going anywhere. I mean, the reality, like you, I kind of like the Four Seasons. It doesn't mean you won't travel, you won't go someplace for a month, but the reality is, I won't be moving south.
Uh-huh.
I don't see myself doing that, and so you might as well have something where you can really be comfortable.
Sure. And I feel bad about the people that do move south, and then I see their license plates now say they're Southerners, and all that is leaving us. We need that support too.
Well, that's the other point, Lois, you're really right, is, and Ken's been very good at trying to track that. People who made their money here, they ought to remember it here,
Mm-hmm.
because that's,
I mean, this South business, we went for many years, but just never could quite buy into that idea of just picking up and.
nice to visit, but that's about it.
It's a great community, so many ways. It's hard to really put it into words in some ways.
Well, you guys have lived it. You don't have to put it in words, you just
Yeah,
have demonstrated it.
Well,
oh, we've been blessed by, just like having this spot. This Joe Gregory postcard on the refrigerator when you go out.
I'll show you
when
another.
Lois's dad built this place, it was just this, little
Main part.
box, and there wasn't any buildings on either side.
They
And then-
represent kids,
Yeah.
so that's what happened. And my dad was here all the time. He was here all summer
Right,
because he could do his work through the mail.
right.
And so he always had a project going. In fact, we can't figure out how could he died at 83, how could he get up those steps? We tried to get me up there, and Ken had to boost my rear to get me going. And
The steps are so far
I'm not
apart.
gonna try that again, but, he always had something up
Yeah,
there
yeah, yeah.
that he would bring down.
Yeah, he built,
fix this, fix that. You know.
he was great for
Yeah, I
So-
got it, yeah.
doing a little storage area up there, and
He always had tools and no shed, no big bathroom like we put. Just had the bathroom right in there with no lid over it. And finally it got a lid on it. But, you know, it's been just a fun
Well-
place to come.
that's right.
With the sand all over the place.
Right,
No
right, yeah.
pretty yards,
But
just
when I
sand.
first came here, and the little powder room here was the only bathroom in the place,
That's
and
what
there were
yeah.
oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah, no lid.
5 in the family,
You
and I
guys,
thought, wow, how the heck-
when are they all gonna get out of the cottage? So I
but it
can
was
go
a
to-
cottage, you know.
It was pretty wild and, well, it was always a fun place, so.
Well, you guys have been fun, and
Yeah.
thank you. I've taken up a lot of your
Well, for whatever worth it is, you're certainly welcome.